Likely is a quiet, rural community of about 350 residents located in the central interior of British Columbia. The pace of life in the community changed on August 4th, 2014 due to the catastrophic collapse of a dam containing waste from the neighboring Mount Poly copper and gold mine. 25 million cubic meters of mining waste, the volume of 10,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, rushed into Poly Lake, down Hazeltine Creek, and into Quesnel Lake, a critical salmon habitat. The spill constitutes the worst environmental disaster in Canadian history. Residents of Likely, Mitchell Bay, and Winkley Creek, small pockets of homes scattered around Quesnel Lake, were either woken up by the disaster itself or by concerned neighbors pounding on their doors or calling by phone to warn of a possible tsunami. The tsunami never happened. Mitchell Bay resident Kim Goforth vividly recalls waking up to the sound of the spill. In the darkness of night, he stood on his deck, recalling, "I could not figure out what it was. It sounded as if 10 Boeing 747 planes were taking off at the same time." In response to the disaster, formal and informal consultations were organized throughout the region. Over 20 formal meetings, pictured here, were organized through the Public Liaison Committee, which includes local community members, Indigenous nations, government, and mine staff. As these flyers show, informal public consultations were also organized in Likely, Quesnel, and Williams Lake for interested members of the public to attend. By the time I began my research in 2019, there were about 40 consultations organized throughout the region. Both sets of meetings allowed the public to learn about the disaster and the remediation programs that followed, pictured here, as well as to ask questions and air their concerns. The meetings were also about the mine's waste management plans, which took on a new level of significance after the spill. I became interested in the disaster and the public consultation process after reading the 2016 Annual Environmental and Reclamation Report. In the appendix are meeting minutes from the PLC that highlight several striking procedural issues. During meetings, community members expressed multiple concerns. There were concerns about the scheduling of workshops and how they limit public participation, about the mining company trying to ban residents from committee meetings, and the overall lack of a holistic approach to consultations in the community. These procedural issues left me wondering, how have residents experienced these public consultations? What barriers prohibit participation, and who is most affected? What criteria make for a meaningful public participation strategy? A focus on the process and outcomes of the consultations help answer these questions. A focus on process examines the quality and characteristics of the meetings, including the representation of different interests, the inclusion of diverse citizen groups, as well as issues related to transparency, fairness, and deliberation. A focus on outcomes is primarily concerned with the results of public consultations. Perhaps the most obvious is the ability of the public to influence decision-making, but it also includes changes to public opinion, evaluations of effectiveness, as well as trust in government and corporations. So how does one gauge people's experiences in the process and outcomes of environmental risk management? In order to better understand public participation after the spill, I gathered data from multiple sources. My primary data includes 42 interviews that I conducted while living in Likely in the summer of 2019. I spent most of my free time at the Likely Lodge, pictured on the left. The lodge is home to a frequently visited restaurant and pub where I was able to get better acquainted with residents. Eventually, I was invited to dinner parties in people's homes, as well as to join residents in huckleberry picking adventures in the bush. I also collected over 200 articles from the local newspaper, the Williams Lake Tribune. Some of these articles, like the one on the bottom right, were written by residents themselves and detail community concerns and responses to the consultations. Finally, I have 5,000 pages of data that I access through a Freedom of Information request and include email communication, as well as letters like the one you see here that detail attempts of the company trying to limit public participation. Such documents offer a critical glimpse into decision-making processes. Findings from my research will have important practical implications. Consider the 2015 independent engineering investigation into the spill on the left that found that we may experience on average 2 dam failures every 10 years if business continues as usual. While we hope to avoid this, climate change and natural disasters increase the likelihood of future catastrophic events. Given this, my case study offers important lessons for public participation in environmental risk management, whether related to dam failures, pipeline spills, or other instances involving communities and environmental change. Considering this, one outcome of my research is a policy brief for BC's Ministry of Environment outlining a meaningful and just public participation strategy. A strategy that moves from informing and consulting to actively involving and collaborating with affected publics so that they are empowered when facing environmental risk and uncertainty. Thank you.